And now I'm going to turn the mic over to my PANA colleague, Reggie Wong, so she can introduce the next set of speakers. Please take it away, Reggie.
Hi. Thanks, Cheng Sim. And I want to thank the assembly members again for taking valuable time out of your day to host this important event. Well, not host, but give information for this important event. I'm Reggie, and my friends and I have gone without health care. And I've cared for one of my friends when he got cancer and passed away. So that kind of led me to work for Bernie and represent him. And I'm honored tonight to introduce Keshy Jeong, who grew up and lives in LA Koreatown with their immigrant family, and they will be sharing their experiences as a young adult balancing school with jobs and surviving in a post-pandemic Los Angeles. Take it away, Keshy.
Thank you, Reggie. I actually don't live with my family, but yes, we did live in Koreatown. So I'll just get started. Before Obamacare passed when I was in high school, I had only seen a doctor or dentist when I visited the Republic of Korea, where they have already had universal health care for decades, and single payer too. If I complained about pain or fatigue, it would be dismissed because I quote unquote looked healthy. Only in adulthood, when my parents finally gained healthcare through employment in manual factory labor, I was formally diagnosed with a chronic illness I've had since birth, actually. By that time, my liver had already deteriorated for over 20 years, and I was set to begin treatment to avoid an organ transplant when my parents were furloughed early on in the pandemic. As their CEO lobbied to reopen California as soon as April 2020, using the well-being of their factory workers as pawns, our healthcare was in limbo. I couldn't access the exams I needed, and I still haven't begun treatment. Though they were eventually rehired, the message from the government and employers was clear: remain expendable, underpaid, and dehumanized in the name of the bottom line, or be abandoned to die during the global pandemic. As a college student working 2 in-person jobs who's been almost continuously employed since I was a teen, I've had to get used to balancing the demands of studenthood, employment, and managing physical and mental health, as is unfortunately common for many students today. But the past year of this pandemic has been especially overwhelming and destabilizing. It has highlighted the absurdity of tying healthcare to employment, especially calling the most precarious and exploited of our state's population essential workers, while in many cases, they would not be protected if they caught COVID or had another illness or injury. During the pandemic, my father was diagnosed with stage 3 cancer and is currently unable to work due to a collapsed lung. Yet his healthcare is dependent upon his employment at a location that has already experienced COVID outbreaks. Luckily, my mother and I are still working, but it's ridiculous the hours we have to pull for our medical and other bills when we should be spending time as a family and taking care of our own health as well. The lack of universal healthcare forces countless families and individuals to make these painful and stressful decisions, like our so-called choice to work in person during the pandemic, when we would not have the healthcare access to deal with COVID-related bills unless we continued putting ourselves at risk of COVID. It feels like the current government has deemed poor people, workers, the chronically ill, and the uninsured as acceptable sacrifices to maintain the profits of the already comfortable, and our only choices right now are to keep working or be completely discarded. Of course, this reality has existed before the pandemic. I've felt the urgency of universal healthcare, including dental and mental healthcare, my whole life, growing up in an uninsured immigrant family below the poverty line in Koreatown and the Bay. As a child, I only found out that I had latent tuberculosis when I saw a doctor in Korea. In the US, I was told in 2015 that I needed 3 severely impacted wisdom teeth extracted, but I still haven't had the money or the time off from work or school to do so. I only receive psychiatric services, including medications, through my college, and I'm unsure what I'll do when I graduate next month. The first time I tried to access mental health care through my high school because I didn't have other access, the white counselor called the cops on me because it scared her when I talked about racism and imperialism and its effect on my mental health. The next speaker, David Mankawa, will further elaborate on this need for healthcare to Asian and Pacific Islander communities to be culturally competent and understanding of our specific histories and concerns. Unfortunately, my story is far from unique. It's an all too common reality for so many people in this state and country due to our for-profit healthcare system, especially for immigrants and people of color, who not only face barriers to access, but discrimination when we do gain services. So thank you, PANA, and everyone for so much for providing the space to share my experience before and during the pandemic, and for everyone for showing up to support this incredibly important and urgent need to provide a human right that is healthcare to all Californians. I hope the success of our effort becomes a precedent nationwide, and stress that not only is it possible to run healthcare differently in this country, it is imperative during the current spread of multiple strains of contagious coronaviruses where everyone's health truly depends on each other's. Thank you.
Thank you, Keshy, and that was awesome. That was heartfelt.